Hi guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Betsy Oji Ofoegbu and this is my mom, Dr. John Oji. We're going to be walking you guys through how to pass your IELTS Band 8 minimum at one sitting. Yes guys, it's very possible and I'm hoping that you enjoyed this video. Please watch till the end. Like, subscribe. At any point in time you have questions, drop it for us in the comment section. Hopefully I'm able to elaborate further on any questions that you have. But in the meantime, welcome to the channel. If you're a new subscriber here, thank you so much for stopping here today. Okay guys, let's get right into the video. Now, what is IELTS? For you to be watching this video, it means that you're either traveling abroad to study or to work and you're required to show proficiency in English language. That's exactly what the test is about. We're walking you guys through the 4 modules, essentially speaking, listening, reading and writing, and then the tips that we have for acing them at once. It's very possible guys. Don't allow anything scare you. Trust me guys, it's easy. I've done it before. I did mine back in 2018 and I passed it. I'll put my scores somewhere here so that you guys can see. But yeah, pretty easy.
My first advice is to determine that you write IELTS once and ace it. Having said that, the tips, I will start with the listening skill. You have to learn to listen with concentration. A lot of times people think hearing is listening. No, there are 2 different activities. You can hear because there's nothing wrong with your eardrums, but you can only listen when you are attentive to what is being said. Yeah. So I advise you even close your eyes when you are listening, so that you capture exactly what is being said, because you'll be tested on those.
Yeah, that's true. I think I agree. When I was having my own test then, I remember, for instance, you might find that in your exam, you would have, they'll be giving you some kind of directions on how to maybe locate a particular library or whatever it is they use in the example. And then you hear them say things like, take the left, take right. And then if you're not like fully focused, you might just miss it.
The idea is to distract you.
Exactly. And they go with a lot of things will be said at once. That's what you must know. For listening, a lot of things will be said at once. The idea is that you are focused on exactly what is being said, and of course picking out exactly where the instructions are, because it's typically instructions on how to find a location or how to catch a train. Those are the typical examples, I think, from my own experience. So yeah, so guys, just like what she said, ensure that you're fully concentrating on what is being said. And I believe for listening, it will be a quick one for you.
Get familiar with British English. Yes. And when I say British English, we recommend the BBC English.
Yeah.
Because IELTS is essentially a test of English for Commonwealth countries.
Yeah, that's
where
true.
English is supposed to be the official language.
Yeah.
Therefore, get familiar by tuning in to BBC prior to your examination, because some of us, especially Nigerians, we have divergent accents. It's BBC accent that's expected at the international level.
That's true. Okay, another thing I remember from my listening is that when I was practicing for my IELTS, I remember watching movies without subtitles. Yes, during that period you want to try and do that, because it's truly essential that when you're watching a movie, you're trying to follow what is being said. But if you have subtitles where they're just literally writing out what is being said, then you're not exercising your own ability to pick out exactly what is being said, which is essentially, like you said, listening, right? Yeah. So yeah, so you can't follow a movie if you're watching the subtitles and then somebody just feeding it to you, right?
Mixing reading.
Yes, exactly. You're going to be having to mix reading and listening at the same time. But if there's nothing else for you to read, essentially you must follow the movie by, just tuning in your ears, like ensuring that your ears are fully plugged into that movie. And yes, I think that helped me a lot. I watched a lot of movies during that period, and I was really focused on not using subtitles. I love subtitles because it helps me pick out every joke and everything that's being said. But when you're preparing for an exam, yes, like IELTS, you want to just watch it without any subtitles. That's the pro tip, guys. Do not miss that.
Now, the next is you'll be tested on speaking. Because listening and speaking are integrated. We repeat what we hear. Therefore, if your listening is good, you are expected to speak in like manner.
Yeah.
Not with local accent, Yoruba accent, Igbo accent. Yeah. No. You have to speak internationally acceptable, intelligible English. Because by the way, you are going to use the language for academic purposes or for work.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to interact with people speaking the same language from elsewhere.
Okay, and on accents, I think I would like to clarify here that it's not your intonation that is really the issue here. So even if you sound Igbotic, for instance, I'm Igbo, right? So sometimes I might pronounce some words and it might look like, oh, she's Igbo. That's why it sounded like the R was being stressed. When you're at that taking your English speaking test, your IELTS speaking test, you realize that it's not really about your accent. Even if you have a little accent or a little intonation, just be clear enough in your pronunciation of your words. In communicating, just understand that your intonation is not what is being tested. So don't think, oh, because I have a very strong Yoruba accent, I would never pass IELTS. No, nobody is discriminating against your intonation. I live here in Canada. I speak to Asians every day. I speak to Nigerians like me. I speak to the whites. I know that everybody has their accent that you might say, this person sounds Scottish, this person sounds Indian, or this person sounds Nigerian. However, it's clear that we can all understand one another, even though our accents are there. So that means, even during your test, understand that your accent is not the reason why you're not going to pass the exam, but focus on pronouncing and communicating what your thoughts are in appropriate English.
Examples of situations you will be asked to speak about. If I were to be testing you and I say, where do you come from? I come from Lagos. Tell me about Lagos. I'm not interested in Lagos, but I want to hear you use English language to talk about Lagos. And I'll be picking your articulation of words, those words that are conflicting for second language users, for example. I would like to hear you distinguish between curse and cause, for example, as against course, because there are three different things. Just make sure you get those distinct words right, because your tester, examiner is actually listening for them, and he won't know how good your fluency is until he hears you in a flow of uninterrupted, unhalted conversation.
Just as you were saying regarding your actual speaking test, another example that they could ask you about, it might just be something that has some register. From what I remember about my own experience, I was asked to talk about caring for a plant. I remember very well. And what came to my mind was use of registers, because I know that back then in school, in secondary school, when they teach us English, they make use of the word registers a lot. And what it just meant was, if you're talking about agriculture, there are some terms that people hear, they know about agriculture. Like, it shows that you're a good speaker of that language. So this is not the time to underplay your sound and just sound generic. If you have some terms that relate to the question you're being asked, you want to use them, right? So what I remember then was, when I was asked to talk about caring for a plant, I said, oh yes, there was a time in primary school I was told to plant a bean. That's basically beans, what we call beans back in Nigeria. Yes, I told my example was, oh yes, we're asked to plant a bean crop, and I remember putting it to attract some sunlight. Eventually it started to grow some weeds. I went out to prune it. I did some, I just was using those terms that would show that, yes, I would show that I know what I'm talking about, right? And I felt that he would just be like, okay, for someone to be using the word prune when they're referring to a plant, this person knows English. Like, it's not just saying, oh, I used to go there and remove weeds from it, yeah, things like that would show, okay, instead of using the word removal of weeds, I just said prune, something like that. So if you have those terms, you want to use them, your vocabulary, you want to really sound like you know English very well, because we speak this language. I mean, this is what we speak back home, right? So exactly why are we not why are we scared of using the terms that we know how to use? But as well, you don't want to go there and sound intellectual. So that's another thing to note. You don't want to go there just sounding like
normal.
Patrick what's that man's name? No, you're not going there to exhaust all the dictionary that you know, but at the same time, just ensure that you use some of your registers when you're explaining your examples.
Speak normal speech speed.
Yeah,
that's another thing.
Controlling your breath and the pace.
That's good. Next, of course, will now be your reading test.
So reading for IELTS exam is more or less reading comprehension. You're not going to be asked to literally read out something, read aloud. No. You'll be asked to read a passage of some sort which has following questions that would have details of what was included in that passage that you should have picked out in your reading of that passage, right? So for instance, I'll give an example. You might be given a passage about birds that were migrating from maybe Canada during the winter to other parts of the world, and then they'll come back when it's summer. For instance, that's just I think I've seen that passage come up quite a lot, right? Okay. Now in that explanation, they'll give a lot of detail. They'll talk about the different types of birds and how the winter is harsh on them and how they eventually have to migrate out of Canada or wherever it is they are at. Now they go along to now give questions. For instance, they can say birds typically have to migrate during the winter. Is that true? Is that false? Was that not given from the passage? Now, from what I even explained already, you know that that's true. Like I literally said that birds have to migrate out of Canada. So something like that is directly known. It is true. There's no lies. It was not ambiguated. Like you can tell the passage actually gave you that information. Then it's true. But if they give you something that you know from the passage, it is false. For instance, they say birds stay in Canada even during the winter. Like the entire passage is about migration. So how can they possibly stay in Canada? So so you know that's false. So you pick false. However, the tricky part of it can be the not given, because sometimes it's not clear from the passage if the passage said that expressly or even implied, you know, something. So so that gets tricky. I know that that's typically the difficult part of passing reading, because I know that that's where I struggle the most. You have to truly ask yourself, whatever it is that is being asked, was it implied? There's some things that are implied. Like you can tell that even though they did not expressly say it, I mean, it's implied, right? For instance, if I say, meet Dr. John Oji, she's a grandmother of 3 children. Is Dr. John Oji a mom or something like that? You can tell that, I mean, how could she possibly have grandchildren if she was not a mom, right? So something like that. That's an example. Yeah, you can infer that from what I have said without expressly telling you that, oh, she has children. But I mean, how else can she possibly have grandchildren if she doesn't have children? No matter what it is, she must have had children at some point in her life, right? So so you can say, even though it's not given expressly, but you can tell. But some other things would literally, you can read the entire passage and you are just not sure because it was just never said. I can ask you, is she a Catholic? And you read everywhere in that passage and you can't see where her faith was mentioned at all. Then you say not given, right? Because it expressly was not given.
In those passages, there are questions that are specifically asked to trick you.
Yes.
The options
I remember
are just half truths, but there is one that captures it all. So we call the others that are not true distractors. Make sure you weigh them and get the one that answers the question, and avoid none of the above or not given or all of the above. They are rarely correct. Rarely correct.
That's true.
So look for that which encapsulates everything that particular question requires. That's the answer. And mind you, you need to be fast.
Yes,
you
I was going to
need to
say
be
that.
Fast. So you don't have all the time to be reading up and down. So it's expected of you that as you are reading, if you're allowed to make notes, I don't know, it's no longer pencil and paper.
That's
it's now
true.
mostly
computerized, right? But I think they give them a scratch pad. I believe so. I think I had a scratch pad in my own time.
You will point what we call those content words you need for your answer, because you really need them.
For reading, one thing I'm going to tell you is when they start asking questions that follow a passage, what I remember as well as a pro tip is that each paragraph typically contains something that will be tested separately, right? So what I mean by this is if there are going to be 5 questions following a passage of what it means is exactly, the passage will likely have 5 paragraphs. So if they ask you a question, you can literally know that this would be on its own somewhere. So don't go thinking you have to read the entire passage again to find out where that was said or written rather. So you can literally go back and say, oh, I remember there was a passage I talked about where the bird, I'm still using the birds example, but for instance, if there was a time they described the nature of the birds, some have maybe a red feather, some have yellow feather, you can easily remember, oh yeah, there was a time they described the birds. You can literally go back to the exact point where that was written and read through it, and then of course pick out the answer from there. So that way it helps you, even though you've forgotten when you read that, you can easily go back and just know that it's within a paragraph. You're not going to have to read the entire passage to pick out the answer. So just note that each paragraph contains a core fact that will be tested in one specific question, and then of course you can easily move on to the next question. Another thing that could be said in the reading is you can be asked to use no more than 2 or 3 words to fill in a gap of a question. So that means that your summary skills have to be really good, because even though you want to explain something in a lot of words, if you're constrained to 2 or 3 words, then it kind of means that you have to be good at summarizing, right? So if they start to make a sentence and then they say birds typically they put a dash, and then they say Canada. So what
You
does
have
that
to
mean?
find-
Yeah, maybe migrate from
Migrate.
Canada. You know, you don't go saying have to leave Canada during the winter. You know, it just like no. You know, the words migrate and from, you know, just already show that, you know, they can fill that space. I'm just giving examples really because, like I said, it's been a while, but I mean the rules have not really changed. If you get what I mean. So yeah, so you guys should just know that you might be your summary skills will be tested in reading, because if you read something, you should be able to comprehend it enough to put it into few sentences, few words, and fill in spaces as part of your test.
And be careful with true or false options.
Yeah.
True or false questions are very dicey.
Yeah.
So you will have to really read what he
Convinced
said
that it was
before you
truly
say it was
said.
said true or not.
Yeah.
The last but not the least, in fact, if you like the most important,
Yes.
is a writing skill.
Yeah.
Because you'll be writing term papers, you'll be writing proposals, you'll be writing reports, you'll be publishing research and findings, and you need to communicate. This is where you'll be tested about writing paragraphs that make sense, coherence, because you transition from one paragraph to another.
Yeah.
And if your punctuation is not good, start rehearsing
That's
punctuation
true.
now.
Very true.
The difference between colon and semicolon and full stop, you have to get them. And after full stop, the next word starts with a capital letter. Don't you ever forget that. Until someone who is not there can read what you are actually saying and make sense out of them, you have not really communicated. And that's where a lot of people score their lowest in that 4-point rating.
Yes.
Writing. So practice, and if possible, show peers, let people help you review what you've written. I am familiar with people who can just write running sentences with no pause marks. That's what we call them, whether comma, semicolon, or full stop, we call them pause marks. They don't pause at all. So what I do is read their sentences, and you find that a whole paragraph has been written and I'm choking reading it because there's no pause mark anywhere. Learn to write cogent sentences without long and winding complex structures, because the more you write, the more errors you are prone to commit. I don't know if I have made sense.
Yeah, I believe you have. Yeah, I was gonna say this as well. When it comes to writing, you would typically be asked to, you know, essentially write an essay. That's how it typically comes. I think most times they give you actually 2 questions or so, if I remember
To choose
correctly.
from?
Yeah, I think, you know, you'll be given 4, then you have to write 2 essays. I remember I wrote 2 essays that day. The one was around a letter writing of some sort, informal
500
letter.
words.
Yeah, and then the other one was like an actual essay, was asking me to talk about like the IDP situation back then in Nigeria. That's displaced persons and stuff like that.
Well,
Yeah,
the
I remember it was,
expository,
yes, like an expository essay. So yeah, so for the, I mean, for letter writing, typically it's, you know, because letters are, I mean, you know what you want to say quickly, you just write your dear sir and all of that. Please, you guys, you have to practice. Obviously, we can't go into every single thing of how to pass IELTS. I'm probably going to do full videos on this, but this is more like quick tips for each of the areas that will be tested, right? So yeah, so just know that for the letter writing, I think it's even easier because you already know that, I mean, a typical letter, 3 paragraphs, you're done. But for essay writing, the longer your essay, the more, you know, they can easily spot blunders, right? Because now you are writing for longer, so the person can say, oh, okay, I see that you didn't put a comma here. So yeah, so you want to try and just keep it as short as it needs to be and communicate your points in concise manner. To be able to achieve this, I will tell you what I did for my own exam. Then I had my points written down on a separate paper, just like the points I wanted to elaborate on. Let's say I had like 5 points. I just put them somewhere. So each point I started with on a paragraph, I would exhaust it. I'll move to the next one. And before you know, like she was saying, the coherence, like you're reading from one to the other, and then the 5 points are structured. I try to do that. Even as we're having, for instance, a YouTube video, you always try to have some points so that as you're speaking, you're not just sounding all over the place. That's how it is too when you're writing your IELTS exam.
And let me tell you,
yeah,
if you start off writing and you are making sense,
True.
it doesn't matter at what point you are made to stop.
Yes.
The examiner already knows that your use of English is
good.
above average.
Yeah,
that's what you must take away from this. So as you are writing, be conscious of your spelling, of your word choice, because many Nigerians mix up words. L-O-S-E is not the same as L-O-O-S-E.
Yeah.
C-A-U-S-E is different from C-U-R-S-E. Now, in speech, we may pardon you But in writing, we penalize you when you mix them up. Because they are not spelling errors. We call them wrong words.
Yeah, you're using
you understand? How do you say forward when you are not putting it in a sentence? I wouldn't know. But if you say forward, the first part of a book written by someone else, and then forward, soldiers in a parade, they are not the same. And many people have written and mixed them
that's
up.
the E. Some people might miss the E.
Not just the E. The word
use it even.
W-O-R-D, not W-A-R-D. For forward is W-A-R-D. And there's no E in the form.
Right?
So we are dealing with two different words.
Yeah,
and they have their entries in the dictionary.
Of course.
So nobody is going to, you can't spell it. It's not a matter of spelling. So know your vocabulary.
Yes, that's true.
Just know the words they are using and that you can spell them, and be confident that wherever you stop in that process of writing, you are convinced that you have communicated. You have impressed the examiner.
When you're doing your writing, another important point is do not practice, like I know I had mentioned writing out some points on your extra sheet that you were provided with, but please, once you start actually attempting the question, write directly into the answer sheet, because they will not be giving you any extra time to transfer what you were writing. And they're not going to mark whatever it is that's on your rough work. So please, guys, I know some people were saying, they thought they would be allowed to. No, you can't possibly transfer stuff, right? So so you want to try, it's time. So you want to try and write whatever it is, just in like succinct points in your rough work, but immediately you start transferring them and elaborating in full on your main answer booklet. If you have to cancel, I know some people like to just cross and move on. Try to just not make it so, you can easily just cross in simple line. This is something that right from WAEC, they always tell us, even if you're going to cross something, just neatly do it and start whatever it is you were writing all over again. Just don't make it so messy, because you would also be graded for mistakes
exactly.
Yes,
because the examiner is also looking at the totality of your handling of that test. If you cancel too many things, it shows you are unsure. You are not ready for international use of English. So don't give them the impression. And remember, it could be CBT. So you might not even be giving paper. Whatever you are writing, typing it to the computer, whatever. And time is of great essence.
Yes. You will be timed. The entire modules will not be tested all at once. You would probably go for your speaking test on a separate day. I think that's how I remember it. But the reading, the writing, and the listening will be tested together. So you kind of need to time yourself, guys. I always say this, even when I coach people for other exams, I say this: have a wristwatch, show up there mentally ready to do what you have to do, and then immediately they tell you to start, you start timing yourself on the basis of the time that is allocated to the entire examination. The time allotted is important, because you don't want to have spent all the time you have on, for instance, reading, and then when it's time to start the listening, you realize that you didn't finish your reading. So it already affects your mindset even before you go into listening, and then before you know, you just come out with a band 666 on everything. Now you don't want that, right? So yes, so guys, it's important to time yourself. That way you're done with one, you feel geared up to move into the next phase of the examination. You want to try and use all the practice materials that you can find on a specific module while you are on that module. For instance, if you're on listening, try and listen to as many as you can before you move on to writing. Don't just go, do listening today, you do writing tomorrow. It can get really confusing. Walk through them one after the other. So once you're sure that your listening is really good, then you move on to writing. Once you're sure, you move on to speaking, things like that. That way you are able to truly say you are prepared for each of the modules before you now go on to book your exam date and then go on for your test. Another important thing I will also say is that you want to try and ensure that you are recording yourselves when you do these things, because I always say it, once you grade yourself while you are preparing for a test, it's very indicative of what your performance will be at the actual test, right? So it's easy to do that for things like reading, things like listening, because you can easily know, like you can go through the questions to see what the actual answers are for the test that you're using to practice. However, for things like speaking and for writing, you might need to find professionals who are, really rooted in, marking people and preparing people for such exams. Like my mom here, she does it all the time. She helps people to vet their answers just to be sure that what you're writing is good enough to impress maybe not even a native speaker, but just someone who would be grading you based on the rules of such a test.
That's right. And don't ever doubt that you can make it.
Of course.
If you really want.
Yeah.
Start today. Give yourself time. Don't write the next IELTS.
Please.
Time yourself and begin to work towards it. I wouldn't want you to pay twice for this exam, and I wouldn't want you to score anything less than 7.5.
Yeah.
If we agreed on that, good luck.
Yeah, thank you guys for watching this video. Please do not forget to like and to subscribe to the channel. I share a lot of tips here as well as just things from my life. If you enjoy my content, please do not forget to like, subscribe, and share these videos, this video with your friends and everyone else that you know preparing for an IELTS exam. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.